Welcome to OhSister, where I unpack my Mormon sister missionary journals 10 years later. This week I decided I wanted to go back to the basics again and talk about another fundamental part of the missionary experience, since I've been getting a little bit more in the esoteric fields of missionary experience lately. So I wanted to talk about the missionary lessons today. And as luck would have it, there was one of my recurring points of inspiration, an exmormon post on the exmormon subreddit that relates to this topic really well. So I wanted to share that post and talk about the missionary lessons and the interactions of missionaries with the investigators or the people who they're trying to teach and convert, and talk about how it's all unhealthy and not good, right? So let me go ahead and read the post. I will cut out a few parts of it that have really personal information, just since it's not as relevant to the general missionary experience, right? But I'm linking it so you can read the whole thing if you want to, and you can see what other people said. But this is the experience of a Mormon investigator who became a convert. And the title says, quote, "I think I was a victim of love bombing by Mormon missionaries." So, a little sad, but let's hear what this person has to say. "Hi, I'm an 18-year-old boy from Brazil. I met two very kind and friendly American missionaries, and we quickly became, quote, best friends. They messaged me every day, called me a lot, took me out for dinner, ice cream, were extremely kind and interested in my life, and I really felt loved. They acted like my best friends and made it a point to spend time with me every day. They kept saying they loved me so much and that I was very important to them. When I said I wasn't ready to get baptized, they told me, 'That's okay, no problem, dear. Can you help us clean the church today?' And when I got there, they convinced me I was ready and shouldn't have doubts. I got baptized. After the baptism, all that love and companionship disappeared. They rarely messaged me, responded with short and dry messages, stopped inviting me to activities. I was abandoned." Frowny face. "And it hurt a lot. It hurt even more because I shared many personal things with them. They knew absolutely everything about me. It was weeks and weeks of intense love bombing. I really loved them, and I thought they loved me too. Now they respond with very short and dry messages and rarely talk to me. Has anyone else gone through this? I really need advice. I'm still a member of the church, but I can't believe in all those things anymore. I found out everything about Joseph Smith, the church's history, the anachronisms and contradictions in the Book of Mormon, and it's all been very painful. I haven't left yet because I feel guilty about leaving the members. They've always been very kind to me." Okay, so that's the story here. So looking back at this, it's this is one example of how missionaries act. And every conversion experience is not like this, but this is the general arc of the conversion experience. And there are key parts of this that are modeled, like they are the ways that we as missionaries were taught to interact with people. There are two main points out of this that I really want to pick out. One, the love bombing, the sort of social, emotional manipulation, and I'll talk about that. And then I also wanted to talk about the lack of informed consent, the stuff that the missionaries taught this person before they were baptized, Then later on, they found out all these things that made them realize they didn't want to be part of this church anymore, but because of the love bombing and all the manipulative things that are wrapped up in this, they feel really stuck. So I'm going to talk about the lack of information control, the lack of full information or informed consent, and the love bombing, and how that's built into the training of missionaries. Okay, so before I get into the specific training that missionaries have, I'm going to read some resources about how undue influence works, which this is going to talk about. So I'm going to talk about love bombing, and I'm going to talk about like information control, coercive deception, that kind of thing. Okay, so once again, we're returning to the work of Dr. Hassan at the Freedom of Mind website. Link in the description to read this, to read the whole thing. So here's some direct quotes from the site. Undue influence is any act of persuasion that overcomes the free will and judgment of another person. People can be unduly influenced by deception, flattery, trickery, coercion, hypnosis, and other techniques. Benign cult groups are any group of people who have a set of beliefs and rituals that are non-mainstream. As long as people are freely able to join with informed consent, which includes full and honest disclosure of the group's doctrine and practices, and can choose to disaffiliate without shunning, fear, or harassment, then it is not a destructive cult. A destructive cult is a pyramid-shaped authoritarian regime with a person or group of people that have dictatorial control. It uses deception to recruit new members and does not tell them what the group is, what the group actually believes, and what will be expected of them if they become members. It also uses undue influence to keep people dependent, obedient, and loyal. Okay, so we'll pause there for a second. So yes, undue influence is the umbrella term that Dr. Hassan, people who are, people who talk about cults, undue influence is an umbrella term to talk about anything that keeps someone from being able to make decisions like fully, right, with free will and judgment. And I really liked the delineation between a benign cult and a destructive cult because throwing around the word cult is like it can be really offensive, but also it can kind of seem silly now, like, I love all these candles, and there's like this group of people online, we all love these candles, and we're like a silly cult or something. And yeah, like basically there are different levels of groups of people, and it's a normal, healthy part of being a human to like be a part of groups and to have your own way of doing things and seeing the world, right? So I like the acknowledgement that it's possible to be in a healthy group benign cult is this term here of like people who have a set of beliefs and rituals that are not mainstream, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. The way that you can tell if it's a destructive cult is if you don't have informed consent when you join, so you don't know everything about the group and their history, and you can't leave without looking bad to the rest of them, like without shunning, fear, or harassment. So what is a destructive cult then? It's a group, a pyramid shape, where there are people on top who have full authority to decide what's good and what's not, which certainly is the case with the LDS Church. I remember the quote from, I don't remember who said it, but this is in my brain from growing up, is when the prophet speaks, the thinking has been done. Like as soon as the church leadership, specifically the male church leadership, say anything like, all right, that's it, That is, I consider that to be dictatorial control. They also use deception to recruit new members, and we don't tell them what the group is, what the group believes, or what's expected of them if they become members. This was what was outlined in this person's experience, the person who posted on Reddit, of how they were manipulated into joining, they were deceived quite literally into getting baptized, and then pushed into it, and then they didn't have all the information. Okay, so I'm going to keep reading now. Okay. You can use the bite model to help you assess the level of control that a group exerts over its members. And side note, I've talked about the bite model a lot, so hopefully you know some about that. Back to the thing. You can also ask any of the questions below. Vague, evasive, deceptive, or manipulative answers are a huge red flag. Give yourself the time and space to investigate and think about any groups you are considering. Okay, so here are the list of questions. There are several different categories. I won't read them all just for the sake of time, but here are some of the questions that you can ask to know whether or not a cult is benign or destructive. Questions you can ask to know if this is a safe, healthy group to be a part of or not. And also, these questions I picked out are questions that I, as a missionary, would not have been able to answer truthfully because I myself didn't know the right answer, like the truth. Or if I had been asked this, I would have known what was right, and I would have purposefully dodged the truth that I did know, because I knew that the investigator wasn't supposed to know yet. Okay, so here is the list of questions. Did the leader have a criminal record, a legacy of allegations against them, or a history of misconduct? I didn't know at the time all of the allegations against Joseph Smith, so I couldn't have answered that correctly. Do ordinary people find them, the leader, inaccessible, unreachable, or elitist? As a missionary, I would have dodged this by saying, well, yeah, the church leaders, the prophet, they are inaccessible and unreachable, but that's because they're the prophet and they're too busy for us. But yeah, red flag. Okay. Is there honest discussion of group history, doctrine, practices, and expectations? Again, no. Are there organizational secrets? As a missionary, I was aware of some, but most of them I did not know, so I wasn't even capable of answering this question correctly. But yes, there are organizational secrets. Are there in-groups and out-groups? Again, yes. My whole life I was raised with the framework of there are members and non-members, and people, even within the in-group, there's like, well, are you active or are you less active? Because you're supposed to be active. And then, of course, the ultimate out-group is ex-members, because they have committed the worst possible sin, which is sinning against the Holy Ghost and denying the faith. So yes, there are definitely in-groups and out-groups. Next. Are there restricted teachings for initiates only? And for this one, definitely yes. I had just gone to the temple, so I knew that there were restricted teachings that only people who were high up enough in the church to have gone through the temple, you weren't allowed to talk to anyone else or to anyone. You weren't supposed to talk about it at all. So yes, there are restricted teachings. Is there real financial accountability and transparency? As a missionary, I would have said yes, but the answer is no. The last several years we've been finding out all of the financial fraud and things that the church has been doing and all the money they've been hiding and hoarding. If there are abuses or injustices, what structure exists to correct them? As a missionary, I didn't know that that abuses or injustices occurred at all. I just thought the church is perfect. And so there are no structures really to correct problems within the church. You just talk to your bishop and then the bishop doesn't do anything, right? And there's also, as I've talked about a couple episodes ago, there are specifically structures to perpetuate abuses and injustices. Okay, next. Is there a code of silence against unethical behavior of leaders? Again, yes. I would have sort of tried to dodge this, but we're not supposed to question the leaders. I think it was Dallin H. Oakes who said that the church doesn't apologize, and you shouldn't ask for the church to apologize even if they did something as terrible as, and perpetuate global racist system of denying priesthood and exaltation to black members for the first more than 100 years of the church, right? Next, are questions and doubts permitted within the organization? Again, no. Are all members expected to conform to group beliefs, or can they form independent belief systems? You're supposed to conform. You can't have your own ideas, or you can get excommunicated, and you certainly get in trouble. Next, what do former leaders and members say about the group? As a missionary, I would have said, don't talk to ex-Mormons. They're all bitter and deceived, and they're going to lie to you and tell you anti-Mormon lies. Does the group claim to have access to absolute truth? Yes, the group does claim to have access to absolute truth. This is the key point of the first lesson, which we would teach, the restoration. Does the group do background checks for people working with children? No. And what measures are in place to prevent child abuse, whether emotional, physical, or sexual? Again, until recently, none. And even with the small things they have done, it's really not enough. And the emphasis is on protecting perpetrators and protecting the good name of the church and the patriarchy within the church. Okay, so this is, I hope you have a good idea now of what I mean when I say it's important to have informed consent. It's important to be aware of love bombing. And there are ways that you can test whether or not a group is a healthy group or a destructive group to be a part of. And now I'm going to read some stuff about how missionaries were trained to teach people and interact with them. And I think this really lines up with the purposeful lack of full knowledge or purposeful deception, really. And then also love bombing. Okay, so I'm going to preach my gospel, chapter 3, this is the chapter that has all the missionary lessons. It's page 29 in case you want to follow along. Here is how it starts. The lessons in this chapter contain the essential doctrine, principles, and commandments that you are to study, believe, love, live, and teach. They are what the living prophets and apostles have directed you to teach. They are organized so that you can help others clearly understand the doctrine of Christ. The lessons in this chapter are: 1. The message of the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. 2. The plan of salvation. 3. The gospel of Jesus Christ. 4. The commandments. And 5. Laws and ordinances. Teach all of the lessons before baptism. Make sure those you teach qualify for baptism and confirmation by making and keeping all of the commitments in these lessons. And then when we turn the page to the first lesson on page 31, there's a little bit more instruction to the missionary that reads as follows. As you teach, help people prepare for baptism and confirmation. Prayerfully decide what to teach and which invitations to extend based on the person's needs, interests, and situation. Be mindful of the questions and level of understanding of those you teach. I'll spare you the reading through all of these lessons, but you can trust me when I say that these 5 lessons are not an honest disclosure of group history, doctrine, practices, and expectations, which is, one of the key points from the freedom of mind resource. Okay, so critical information is purposely withheld from investigators and new converts. The only thing we tell them is the milk of the of the church doctrine. So yeah, there's this is probably like a saying outside of the church too. This is probably just like a saying in general, like milk before meat. But this was a big concept with like the missionary teaching. I think it says it somewhere in Preach My Gospel, but I can't be bothered to look it up. But we were taught to specifically withhold anything weightier than these 5 things that we were supposed to teach. We were just supposed to teach about like the existence of God, about how God's church had been on the earth and then it had been taken away and then it was back now. And people needed to join because it was back now. And a few other really small, like, what baptism means, what prayer means, like Holy Ghost, like really, really infinitesimally small things in relation to all the information that there is about the church. And specifically to the person's post, if we go back to exmormon Reddit, so when they were being taught by these missionaries and the missionaries were spending all this time with them and saying that they loved them and they cared for them and they really wanted them to get baptized, the things that the missionaries were teaching this person was just these 5 lessons. And then after they were baptized and the missionaries kind of stopped paying attention to them, the missionaries put their efforts on other people that they were trying to baptize. Then this person said they found out all the stuff that they should have known and all the stuff that had they known it they would not have joined. So let me reread to you again what they said. They said, "I'm still a member of the church, but I can't believe in all those things anymore. I found out everything about Joseph Smith, the church's history, the anachronisms and contradictions in the Book of Mormon, and it's all been very painful." Okay, so this person wishes this had never happened. It's, if I read between the lines, it seems like they wish this had never happened. They wish they had never had this happen to them. It's felt really abusive and traumatic. And they realized after the fact that they didn't even have all the information, that now that they have it, they don't believe what they were taught. Okay, so I also want to talk about the love bombing aspect. So I haven't explained what love bombing is yet, and I was looking for a short explanation of love bombing, and I wanted one ideally from the Freedom of Mind organization, since I really like their resources. I found one on Instagram. I normally don't cite Instagram, but because you can kind of just say whatever, but since it was from Dr. Hassan, and I read through it and it seemed to be in line with what I know about love bombing, I trusted enough to read it on a podcast. So here's what he says about love bombing, and you can learn more about love bombing if you're not really sure if this is right, of course. But here's what he says about love bombing. He says, "Love bombing is a psychological manipulation tactic used in cult recruitment where new members are given excessive attention, praise, and affection to create an emotional dependency. This tactic makes recruits feel valued, accepted, and deeply connected to the group, which can override their critical thinking and make them more susceptible to indoctrination. And here's how to spot love bombing. There are 5 examples that he gives. Okay, the first one is excessive flattery, receiving overwhelming compliments and praise, especially from strangers. 2, rapid intimacy, accelerated expressions of friendship or love, making you feel like you found a new family or soulmate quickly. Constant attention, persistent messages, calls, or invitations that leave little room for personal space. Generosity, lavish gifts or offers of help that seem disproportionate to the relationship's early stage. And isolation encouragement, subtle or overt suggestions to distance yourself from friends, family, or former beliefs to deepen ties with the group. And he finishes with, recognizing these signs can help protect against manipulative recruitment practices. Have you ever encountered any of these behaviors in a group setting? Okay, so I'm going to read from Preach My Gospel again. In chapter 10, this is a chapter on how to improve your teaching skills. Within that, there's a subsection called How to Begin Teaching. And I actually didn't even have to look in Preach My Gospel again to remember the title of the subsection, because How to Begin Teaching was like one of the golden rules of my mission. Like, I had the phrase How to Begin Teaching memorized. I would write it in my planner as a shorthand, HTBT, to remind myself to do this when I was in lessons. And we studied this a lot to make sure that we set up the interaction and guided the way things went right, because if you didn't do it right the first time, it was really hard to change things. And so this is on page 178, Preach My Gospel, and this section gives a structure to how the social interaction of a lesson should go underneath your guidance as a missionary. And it begins with this specific instruction. Quote, it says, "The first few moments with people are very important. They must learn to trust you. Begin your first visit in a warm, respectful, genuine manner. Ask a few simple questions to help you understand their religious background and their expectations regarding your visits. For example, ask, what role has religion played in your life? Do not, however, ask personal questions that would make them uncomfortable. Explain that you would like to begin and end each lesson in prayer. Suggest that you will offer the opening prayer. Pray simply but fervently that the Lord will bless the people you are teaching in every aspect of their lives, and especially that they can feel the truth of what you will teach. Demonstrate sincere interest and love for them and faith in the converting power of the gospel." Okay, so there's a little bit more here, but in this part, already there are several red flags for coercive control or like love bombing, which I did not know when I was a missionary. I just thought, I read this and I was like, of course it's important for people to trust us. It's important to make a good impression. We're representing Christ and his true restored church, and they need to feel the Spirit. They need to feel the love of God through our love of them. We need them to feel connected and know that this is super important, and we need them to feel the Spirit, aka elevation emotion. But there's a lot of specific focus in this section on things that were marked as love bombing in, Dr. Hassan's warning. He said, like, excessive flattery, rapid intimacy, constant attention, generosity, isolation, encouragement, right? And what do we have? We have phrases like, begin your first visit in a warm, respectful, genuine manner. suggest that you will offer the opening prayer. Pray simply but fervently that the Lord will bless the people you are teaching in every aspect of their lives. Like getting very intimate and vulnerable and praying for them to be blessed by God in every way. Like, that's gonna feel good, right? And then also to demonstrate sincere interest and love for them. Okay. Then, even more specific, that's already pretty love bombing-y, but there's a list of different thoughts that you can sort of pick and choose which ones feel appropriate for each person. But they all kind of flagged to me, the excessive flattery, the rapid intimacy, the attention, the generosity, isolation, encouragement, those things. So I'm just going to read a few of them. You can think for yourself what you think, but I'm gonna read some of these because I think they are in line with love bombing. Okay, so they say, as guided by the Spirit, you may express thoughts such as the following. 1. Our message will enable you to improve the quality of your lives. It will help you deal with the problems and challenges that we all face in life. So that, that's like kind of assuming that you know what's best, putting yourself on a pedestal, you're being generous, giving them our message will enable you to improve the quality of your lives, right? And the second one, as you accept our message, you will learn how to make covenants or promises with God. You will learn how to make changes to bring your lives in closer harmony with his teachings. You will want to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ and be baptized by proper authority. So that one, you're kind of like leading the way of like, okay, here's what you're going to want after we tell you this. So once we get to that point and we ask you, you've already been primed to that this is what you want. The third one is, because God is our Heavenly Father, we are all brothers and sisters. We would like to refer to you as brothers and sisters. So there we go, getting rapid intimacy, your Insta family, like, I'm not a stranger to you, I'm your family, I'm your sister, You call me Sister Finlinson because I'm literally your sister. That's for love bombing. And then finally, each person we teach has personal challenges and concerns. No matter what your needs or concerns might be, the Savior and his teachings, the gospel, will help you. So, promising relief and comfort and help, which at the time I totally thought was exactly what everyone in the world needed. And, I thought that the good feelings that this rapid connection made were based in, in the gospel and Jesus' love. And now I look at this and I can still remember how it felt, like having this interaction with people, especially when they were, like the golden investigators, the ones who actually did care and they did want to listen and they were looking for, something more, something to be a part of, something to believe in. But now I can just see how I was part of a system of manipulation, and, I was manipulating them and I was manipulated to manipulate, right? Because I myself didn't have full informed consent, and I myself was the system of love bombing is just part of, at least in Utah, the church culture. So I didn't know all the stuff about the church that I should have known if I was going to go and try to recruit people. And I didn't know that you shouldn't love bomb people, right? So I'm not saying like that I don't have responsibility for what I did, but I can say that I can see why I did what I did, and, missionaries, now looking at them, I'm like, oh my goodness, they're so young, and they just don't even know. They don't even know, so. Yeah, that's the spiel on missionary lessons, and how missionaries are just little kids trained to go out with full zeal of their love of life and their full faith in an organization that meets the criteria for being a destructive authoritarian cult. Just totally not knowing and not having the information, not knowing, not being able to ask the questions, having been raised in a system where we're primed to never doubt or question or distrust anything from the church. It's just, what a big mess, right? What a big mess. I've been having a great time working on this project, but it turns out it takes a lot of time every week to keep this up. If you have the desire and the means to support me financially, it really helps a lot. Of course, I have the disclaimer that your donations will not bring eternal salvation for you or anyone else. There are links in the description where you can make a one-time donation or sign up to be a monthly patron to support this and my other creative work. Thank you, and let's get back to it. Monday, February 2nd, 2015. Mission Day 115. We had a pretty great P-Day. Brother Martin drove us to a local landmark, and we got a picture. He told us about his job taking care of wildlife, as well as researching wildlife conservation. He has a PhD, apparently. Also, I finally got new batteries in my watch, and it was only $6.49. For a guarantee until September 2020, I'd say that was a well-spent $6. We finally had another appointment with Sylvia Lake. The last time we saw her was January 5th. She super quickly and bluntly let us know that she knows she isn't living the gospel, but she enjoys her current lifestyle and doesn't want to change. She talked about the atonement, but feels that she can't use it at this time, ... Obviously, she wants to change if she's meeting with us and listening to hymns on Pandora and praying some. She's just very scared. Too scared to change. I'm like that sometimes. With last summer, for instance, when I spent most of my time by myself watching Netflix. I wanted to do something, but it was so much easier to just sit and turn the page or click next. And then tell myself I'm increasing in culture or understanding. Well, hopefully, I've learned my lesson. There's that first Monday. It's surprising that I'd been living at Brother Martin's house, and it's been a few months now, and I still hadn't found out that he wasn't Brother Martin, he was Dr. Martin. He had a PhD. I didn't know. Cool that he does wildlife conservation, though, cool little moment. I wanted to briefly touch on how this Sylvia Lake, I didn't write about her the first time we met her in January, but now we're meeting with her again, so I guess she was a less active member, aka she didn't really attend church regularly, and we met her because we were going through the ward lists and not because we met her at church. And it seems like she was kind of saying, look, I believe the church is true, but I don't want to go. I'm happy with my lifestyle. So, I said she was blunt with us. So, but I interpreted that was, well, she wants to change because she's letting us come over and she's, interacting with church stuff. She prays and she listens to hymns. So there's kind of this just mismatch of maybe she was doing this weird dance of I don't I want to, like, be more involved in the church, but I have, like, all this stuff, and, like, maybe this is... No. You know, I think she might have just been trying to, like, set a boundary with the missionaries of, like, look, you sisters, you can come over if you want to. I'm not going to get mad at you, but, like, I'm not going to change, right? I'm living my life the way I want. I believe some of the church stuff, but I'm not going to do it all. And the way that I responded to that was like, well, obviously she wants to change because XYZ. Like, she's saying one thing, but she will talk to us, so I don't believe her, and I know better, right? Very, like, it's not entitled. It's like, you know, it's just missionaries, for better or worse, you know, we just felt like we really knew what was going on all the time, and we could really read people's true intention, like, beyond what they said, because we had the full gospel and we knew that they wanted it, and we just wouldn't believe anyone who said no, you know? Like, just a lot of arrogance that was very unrecognized, you know? Very unrecognized arrogance in myself. And I wanted to talk about the example that I gave of how a lot of, like, being comfortable and scared to change and wanting to change. And the example that I gave that I felt so guilty of was how I had, like, the summer before my mission, spent a lot of time, or I guess the summer before my mission, I'm not sure which one. But I guess I felt guilty that I had spent so much time just, like, reading or watching Netflix by myself, and, like, I was like, oh, I should have been out, like, helping the missionaries, or doing family history work, or, like, helping my parents with chores or something, like, and, I mean, there's certainly an aspect to, you know, sometimes I still kind of get stuck in the rut of interacting mindlessly with the internet or whatever, and I'm like, oh, this sucks, I wish I was doing something else, I can't get myself off my dang phone, you know, I'm sure we've all been there, but I looked at this as, like, a spiritual failing, and I was, like, comparing this in myself to an imagined world in someone else. Like, I was imagining that she had this thing that I had. Guess I was projecting. And I was like, look, when I wasn't 100% productive and 100% for Christ, I didn't like it. So surely that's how you feel. And, I'm gonna listen to what I think, you know. Ugh, okay, I'm just gonna keep going. Tuesday, February 3rd, 2015, Mission Day 116. Our lesson with Kyle this morning was amazing. For the first time as a missionary, I was super, super guided by the Spirit. My testimony almost exploded out of my mouth. I guess to make sense, we were teaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. Apparently, although Kyle knows God answers prayers, he doesn't understand God's love, and he's certainly never felt it. Brother Polk kept insisting that surely Kyle's father had been an example of love, which got Kyle going on how his adoptive parents did not love him, how he did not have the ideal childhood, and as a result, can't even imagine God's love. I was sensing in the backdrop some anger at the situation he'd been dealt. Sister Johnson tried having him imagine love for a child of his own, and that's when I thought of how I could help him, and the thought grew and grew until I could no longer contain it. I cut into Sister Johnson as it bursted out, slightly awkwardly. I shared how Mom's dad wasn't perfect either, how I never met my grandpa because he died in prison. I told Kyle that my mom hadn't had a perfect father figure to understand God's love, but that's not what you need. She did what we all have to do to feel God's love. She learned from the missionaries, read, prayed, went to church, made covenants with God, and lived the gospel. I told him that that is how we feel God's love, and that's what we want for him and why we're meeting. And I didn't even need to apologize for crying. He could see that I was sincere. It is so amazing and humbling to be in that moment of guidance, to realize that the Holy Ghost is giving you exactly what to say and testifying to your heart and the hearts of all in hearing that what you say is true. My patriarchal blessing states that, quote, as you stay close to the iron rod, the Word of God, and study the Scriptures, when you are bearing your testimony, words will come to you because you are being prompted by the Holy Spirit in ways that will help you explain the gospel to those who have not yet heard of the gospel. Unquote. I know that promise was kept today. I'm so grateful I was able to be a mouthpiece to help Kyle understand. He realized that he never wants to act until he knows and believes something. So I shared Ether 12:27 and Alma 32:21. He now understands that, just like with prayer, in order to know that the Book of Mormon is true, he has to read it and pray to know. I pray he will act on this knowledge he's been given. I'll do all I can to help him be converted unto the Lord. I bought Harry Potter stamps today, and I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to part with them. All right. Wow. Okay, so this day, a little bit hard to know where to even start. Let's see. For sure, I can say this. So, let me make sure I'm saying the right name. Kyle, yes. With Kyle and trying to help him understand God's love, I totally understand where I was coming from. When this happened originally, I really understand why I felt the way that I felt and why I said what I said and why the things that I said felt so powerful and real and moving, right? Because this basically encapsulated my worldview of it's really important to know that God loves us, and the way that we feel God's love isn't through remembering any sort of love from anyone in the world. It's through our obedience. I'm so focused on obedience on my mission, and I'm so focused on the idea that as you physically go through the acts of devotion, as you live the gospel, quote unquote, which is what the lesson was that we were teaching Kyle this day, was to live the gospel. So believe in God and believe all the things, and then to physically do everything you're supposed to do. And that was my understanding of how you feel God's love, And I shared my mom's story with him, which of course I would. That was my frame of looking at the world, was the things I had been taught and the things that I experienced, right? It makes sense, but I guess I think I now have more experience, right? And I have been taught more, both from life and from listening to the lives of others, right? And now in this situation, I would have a very different advice for this man. First of all, now, at a basic level, I would not presume to know what is best for him. I would, if he was actively looking for my advice and counsel, then I would say, that you probably know what's best for yourself, and like I can help you try to sort that out, but like ultimately you gotta trust yourself, right? And that's not what I was saying as a missionary. um, but then, you know, if I was somehow in the missionary context with him again, and I was hearing his, you know, burden of having had some sort of traumatic upbringing with his adoptive parents, I would definitely be more compassionate about that, and I would make sure to say, you know, like it's not your fault, and you deserve love, and you deserve to be treated better, you know, and like let's get you into therapy because therapy's great. Let's get you all the social services that are available to help you at this point, you know, and I would certainly try to help him find a community of people who understood what he was going through and would help, but it would probably be like, I don't know, maybe a community church group, depending on, you know, but also maybe like a 12-step group or something, because lots of people in those groups are super good neighbors and super good community and really just empathetic and there for each other. So I don't think he had necessarily any, you know, addictions or anything, but just going to 12-step groups, I think can be a really good thing, you know, like find him something like that. I feel it feels a little bit like sensitive and raw that I would have used my mom's story in such a way. Like I understand why I did this is because I was, you know, in the church. Everything is supposed to be for the work of God, and everything has God's hand in it. It's all for the glory of God. But now when I read through this and I was, you know, talking about like my mom and her dad wasn't, you know, very good dad. You know, he died in prison. I never knew him, which is probably good for me, you know, which is sad, but I guess I feel bad that my family's story and trauma wasn't like what was used to as a means to make the church look better, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't mind so much that I shared my mom's story, which, you know, in its way is my story, right? It's more the fact of the context that I shared it in, and the way that I tried to use this as evidence of why he should be Mormon, why he should believe what we were saying. I don't like that as much. Also, like along with this, you know, I wrote in my journal, it is so amazing and humbling to be in that moment of guidance, to realize that the Holy Ghost is giving you exactly what to say and testifying to your heart and the hearts of all in hearing that what you say is true. And then I go on to talk about how my patriarchal blessing like promised me that I would have this capability if I stayed close to God and read scriptures and stuff. And now I just see that way of thinking as a way that I was systematically disenfranchised from my own power as a woman, as a person with the innate power and inspiration that any human has, right? Like, I do think that there was like a group experience of understanding and believing the thing that I said, but I think it was because I was sharing something that was very heartfelt for me and very vulnerable. You know, kind of in the like along the lines of love bombing at least in the sense of, like, it was a really vulnerable thing to open up with, so, like, being very emotionally open with someone I didn't know very well, right? We were taught to do that, but getting back to my thought, the church systematically trained me and everyone in it that when we say something clearly, when we speak well, it's not us, it's like from God. The church teaches us that when we say something that resonates with other people, it's not from the beauty of shared vulnerability and shared human connection. It's like the mystical Holy Ghost that can be kept away from us if we're not doing XYZ. So there's just this sense of not knowing that I have this capability and this power with me at all times, and it's not given to me by some deity who will give and take away whether or not I'm being as obedient to whatever his random whims are, right? Like, I see a lot of disempowering of myself that I didn't even realize. And now I read that and I can see that what I said was powerful, not because it was what God told me, but because that feeling of God that I had in myself, it was myself, it was my own knowing, it was my own inner wisdom. And when I shared that, it's powerful, So I guess that's what I want to say about that. Let's keep going. Wednesday, February 4th, 2015, Mission Day 117. This morning was pretty great. We had a lesson with Josephine at 10, a lesson with Jessica at 11, both were on the restoration, and a lesson with Lynn at 12, where we began to dive into the character of Christ. They were all great, and then we had district meeting and lunch at 3:30, and a lesson with Esther, and dinner, and a lesson with Daniel. To prepare for Lynn's lesson today, I studied the character of Christ, and it was exciting yet also disheartening to read. I can see Sister Johnson and her development of turning away from the natural man, and I am beginning to understand just how far I have to go. But there is hope. Smiley face. And then here's a big quote from the character of Christ. Quote, "We can in mortality seek to be blessed with and develop essential elements of a Christ-like character. Indeed, it is possible for us as mortals to strive in righteousness to receive the spiritual gifts associated with the capacity to reach outward and appropriately respond to other people who are experiencing the very challenge or adversity that is most immediately and forcefully pressing upon us. We cannot obtain such a capacity through sheer willpower or personal determination. Rather, we are dependent upon and in need of the merits, mercy, and grace of the Holy Messiah. But, line upon line, precept upon precept, and in the process of time, we are enabled to reach outward when the natural tendency is for us to turn inward." Unquote. Elder Benar. I think this is a good reminder for me to remember that I personally have to rely on the Savior. I'm sure many people I teach will feel they have much further to go, and it's important that I can understand that. But the way I can help them and myself is by remembering to rely on Christ every day and to have hope that whosoever, quoting a scripture, "Whosoever receiveth light and continueth in God receiveth more light, and that light groweth brighter and brighter until the perfect day." D&C 50:24. I have hope that the Lord can use my mission to change me. I have faith in myself to continue to strive to a Christ-like character. I know the atonement can help me change every day. That's what it's all about. Interesting day. There's a very strange combination of a very short paragraph of me reporting on the day and then my kind of philosophical musings is the bulk of the entry. And the first part of the day, I wrote down that basically we were busy like every hour. We had a completely packed schedule. Honestly, more than I like to do in a day now. It was a lot. We were as busy as we could have possibly been, right? And then I wrote basically about how I need to think of myself less and minimize myself more. Just be so much less focused on myself, which is a unsurprising due to its recurrency, but sad, sad thing. The character of Christ. Do you know what this is? If you're a missionary, you probably do, but if you didn't go on a mission, you probably don't. So Elder Bednar, one of the apostles, gave a speech. I don't know. I didn't look this up because I actually quoted it in my journal, and maybe I'll look it up at some point, but I think it's from like the early 2000s, this speech, and I think it was given in some sort of missionary training center context, this talk wasn't done for general conference, so it wasn't like widely available to everyone. It's like kind of focused in on missionaries. And it's one of the like deep lore talks that missionaries will get obsessed with because it feels like something special and something deep to like focus on when you're on this, spiritual pilgrimage of the mission. That's how it felt like, right? And I remember being obsessed with this talk, but I kind of didn't remember what it was about. So I was curious how it would come up in my journal, and I was curious what I would say about it. And of course, this talk is so focused on like turning outward, turning away from ourselves, and in moments of struggle, whether it's our own or someone else's, always turning out and not focusing on yourself. Because that is totally what we were being told to do, right? And I was very much accepting that narrative, and I was like, yes, I am not great, and I am too proud, and I need to be more humble. I need to look further down upon myself and not think of myself at all, I don't know if you remember when I wrote, is something tying me down to myself, right? It's giving that. Specifically, I will point out the whole like, I could see Sister Johnson, and of course I wasn't in her mind, so I didn't know her thought process. I just saw the things that she did when, I saw her actions. And to me, as when I was the younger missionary and she was my trainer, to me it seemed like she was so good at doing this, at just like ignoring herself and focusing outward. And I was like, oh, I need to do that more. I want to be like her because I need to be like Jesus, right? I think something that was particularly toxic about this talk is this idea that, it says, to paraphrase, when we're alive now, it's possible for us to become like Jesus, at least in some ways, So there was so much perfectionism in my life even before my mission, just from all the church stuff I had learned I really thought that it should be possible for me to never make mistakes, just at all. But then I go on my mission and I'm reading this kind of stuff every day, and there's an apostle who I believe to be talking to me as the voice of the Lord. And what does the apostle say? The apostle says, it is possible for you to achieve, like, godliness in mortality, which means if I'm not doing it, then I'm really doing something wrong, And I really also I just don't like the idea that if I want to be good at responding to other people in distress, like forgetting, okay, what do I do when I'm in distress? Even if we just focus on the important quality of like empathy and service, right? Like if I want to be able to respond to people well, he says I cannot. He says we can't do this through sheer willpower or personal determination. He says we're dependent on Jesus. It's like only as we do all the things that Jesus says we have to do. So being obedient to all of the little things. If you're a missionary, it's like everything in the White Handbook. If you're not a missionary, it's, still a pretty impossible list of things to have to do. To always be doing and thinking and not doing. It's like saying that focusing on others and not yourself, and never focusing on yourself, and always just being really rigid about compulsively doing everything that this church says you to do. Now I know from experience that is not what makes you good at helping other people. In fact, now I know from experience that you love others best when you love yourself first. I know from experience that the more I compulsively avoid myself and turn away from myself, and the more I compulsively follow a list of tasks or thoughts or like things that I'm following, a life that is given to me by someone else, by some group, that does not give me the ability to respond to other people. It makes it impossible to do so. It's only by, in fact, like kind of doing the opposite of what Elder Bednar is saying to do, where I've been able to actually be a resource for other people, So instead of in moments of distress, whether someone else's or mine, instead of turning out, I'm doing the opposite. I'm learning to turn in and take care of myself first, like, oh, something's going on. I need to, instead of trying to put out the fire first, I gotta attend to myself and help myself feel okay and deal with my own dysregulation and my own upset. And then I can turn to others and I can be a steady place for them, right? And also, I need to literally get the brainwashing and the programming out of my brain and actively choose for myself what feels good and what doesn't feel good, and what I value, what I don't value. I'm learning to put away the script and build my own life, and that is also giving me the capability to really interface with the world in a way where I can actually like make a difference in my own unique way. And I think like that's kind of like my gospel now, if I had to put it in that language. I would now, what I really believe is the most important things we can each do is to take care of ourselves first, and then to understand ourselves and to live authentically. And that's how we best help other people as well, right? I really do believe that. Okay, keep going. Thursday, February 5th, 2015, Mission Day 118. Today was mercifully slow due to planning. At 10, we had an area call, then we planned until 2 o'clock when we got to go to Goodwill to sort and hang clothes. Tracting today was awesome. In 1 hour, we talked to 3 people, 2 of which are now potential investigators. We have their names and address, and they're interested in learning more. During our tracting hour, we got a text from headquarters saying that a brother Glenn Orozco would like a Bible. We stopped by his apartment, and his cute wife, Illuminata, told us when he'd be home, smiley face. I finally wrote Mom and Pop letters. I think it's the 3rd I've sent to them. That's it for that day. Not a lot to say, except for the fact that I was definitely, I was slipping a little bit when I was like, yeah, it's nice that today was slow and we had a chance to plan and then go to Goodwill. You know, like today was mercifully slow. There's some honesty leaking out there. And then, of course, I had to say tracting was awesome because I needed to always look on the bright side and not complain. Pretty sure I have a few times now in here said I'm never going to complain again, right? So I was trying really hard to not complain about tracting, which I hated. So I was looking on the bright side, always looking on the bright side, looking for the silver lining. And while I hated tracting, at least we found some people who would talk to us and were interested. And that was like, yeah, at least it wasn't totally pointless, right? Although Glenn Orozco, I don't think anything ever came of that headquarters referral. Probably luckily for him and his family. Interesting that I also wrote letters to my parents. I sent home emails every week, so it wasn't that I wasn't contacting them at all, but it was hard to have time to write letters in addition, but it was important to me, so I tried to also write physical letters home, but, you know, I didn't have very much time on P-Day, so I think it was just in the few spare moments that I had in mornings and evenings between also trying to get ready and write my journal and all that, I would also try to write letters, but, you know, it wasn't a lot of time. Let's move on. Friday, February 6th, 2015, Mission Day 119. We found Sister Johnson's name tag. It was lost, all caps, literally, last transfer. Crazy, eh? We just sat down with Cheryl Mayfield for the first time when she asked if Sister Johnson was missing a name tag, because there was one sitting on the board downstairs. Sister Johnson immediately stared at me, and I knew it was all she could do to keep herself from pausing the lesson and running downstairs. Personally, I am quite impressed with her willpower. Our Character of Christ Part 2 lesson was at 2 with Lynn today. I'm so amazed at her strength. She told us that Troy isn't happy with her now, but she's not going to stop the gospel ever again. She said even if it meant not pleasing Troy, she needed to be there for Daniel and for herself. Go, Lynn! Also, she had a cool insight that Christ's church is modeled after his character. It is, for instance, consistent and about service. I cried in companionship inventory, as I shared a strength I've seen in Sister Johnson this week. On Tuesday, right after we'd read through the Character of Christ, we received a text from Sister Dunbar saying that she had to cancel coming with us to lessons because her grandfather had passed away. Sister Johnson immediately responded in empathy and thought of a message to send back, and was close to tears almost all day. I didn't feel affected at all, and the distance gave me time to realize and ponder the growth she's had, and that I need. So I let her know today that she is letting her mission change her. She is becoming Christ-like. We made Nefla for dinner, and it only took about 30 minutes. Alright, gotta talk about that. First of all, jumping back to the missing name tag, it felt like a really big deal to not have your name tag. I won't bother flipping through the white handbook, but I'm pretty sure it says never go anywhere without your name tag. We were not ever to go. Even if we were doing some sort of like once in a blue moon hiking activity or something on our few hours of spare time on P Day, and we were wearing pants or something, you know, we always had to wear our name tags no matter what. And there was additionally this fear that if we lost our name tag, someone would take it and use it for malicious purposes. You know, like someone would try to be an evil missionary and pretend to be a missionary, but really they would preach the opposite, you know? Which now I realize is like pretty unrealistic, and you know, I don't think that there were forces of evil just looking for chances to get our name tags to deceive. But that's what it felt like. So yeah, that's kind of part of the drama of Sister Johnson's missing name tag, and then realizing it was just close by and it had just been sitting there, you know, like anyone could have just grabbed it, you know. So but let's move on to the character of Christ stuff, because of course we're sharing this with Lynn. The woman who needs not missionaries giving her more intense church lore of self-hatred. That's not what she needed, but you know, she was not a standard missionary investigator, so we weren't teaching her just the normal missionary lessons like, you know, we talked about. She just got whatever cool stuff we were learning about, because she already knew everything. So we were like sharing with her just the stuff that we were learning about, which was more of the intense shaming Mormon doctrine stuff. So I wanted to point out a couple things from that. She said that her husband wasn't very happy with her, but she was determined to continue following her truth and being involved with the church, and, you know, keep doing the gospel and be there for her son and for herself, which, like, I mean, that is a good thing, right? It is good to have enough sort of self-determination that you feel like you can do what you believe in, no matter what, right? And it could be hard with relationships, right? Especially close relationships, if there are conflicts. So, you know, I'm like glad for her that she had that inner strength, but I wish for her that it wasn't for this organization that had been so cruel to her, you know. I never really got to talk to her husband to understand why he didn't like the church, you know, kind of for obvious reasons, but I can kind of use my empathetic guessing skills, and I can imagine a few reasons why he might be upset with her getting involved with the church again. Even from just a purely wanting her to be okay and wanting her to not suffer the way that the church had already made her suffer, you know? Like, and I don't know what the beef was, but so yeah, it's complicated, I guess. And the thing that Lynn said about the church totally made me a smug little grin. Because I wrote that, you know, she had this insight that the church is modeled after Christ's character, which, you know, that's what the talk is all about. It's about, like, what's Jesus like and how do we be like Jesus? And she said, for example, the church is like Jesus because Jesus is consistent and Jesus is all about service, and the church is consistent and the church is all about service. And on my mission, I was like, yes, absolutely, the church is consistent and the church is all about service. And now I'm like, actually not so hard and fast, not totally true. Just in the time since I left the church, there have been several changes of things that are not consistent within the church, but also now I am a little bit more aware of the whole history of the church, and I'm like, yep, never been consistent. if I knew about any of those things on my mission, I would have just said, well, the church changes because God is constantly revealing things. So, one year he says something, and the next year things are different, and he says something else. So it's not change. It's not like inconsistent. It's just continuing revelation. But now I'm like, no, that's a cop-out. That's a way to deflect and say, well, 100 years ago, we said this is the way it is, and it has to be this way. And if it's not this way, it's wrong. And now we say, oh, we've just changed. God changed, it's continuing revelation. I'm like, no. That's inconsistent, and don't claim that it is. And then also, now I know that the church is not all about service. I know that the church has all the money that I thought was going to, like, if anything, temples, but also I thought, helping refugees and immigrants and going to other countries and helping them with service projects and all, I thought the church was doing a lot of charity with their money, and it turns out they're not. And also, even on my mission, I was kind of having to grapple with the fact that we were not allowed to do over a certain amount of service hours every week, or like I think it was every transfer. They were restrictive of how much service we did, and part of me was like, that doesn't totally make sense, because isn't the church supposed to be all about service? And then I kind of did the mental gymnastics of like, oh well, I think it's just because we have time after our missions to be involved in like lowly just service projects, but we only have this time on our mission to like preach God's word 24/7. So that's like the highest calling of service. So I should just like, they need us to focus on that. That's the most important work. More important even than any sort of service project we could do is for us to proselyte. And now, yeah, that doesn't quite, I think I was a little hoodwinked there, which is okay. I'm grateful to be a little bit more informed now. And, yep. Also, I just wanted to reach out to past me, to Sister Finlinson, with a little bit of compassion for how, just once again, I'm feeling like I'm not good enough. I'm comparing myself to Sister Johnson, and Sister Johnson, I think it was the Relief Society president. She was supposed to come with us, but had a death in the family, her grandfather. So she canceled. And then Sister Johnson, if I remember correctly, I think Sister Johnson's grandfather had died. So that struck an experiential chord with her, right? Like, she knew what it was like, and she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And she was thinking about it all day, and I saw her like that, and I didn't see that we were different in experience. I thought that, I saw we were different, but I was like, oh, well, I'm supposed to be this way. I'm supposed to be 100% focused out of myself and focused on Sister Dunbar and her suffering, and I'm not. I'm just like I'm just kind of going around my day like not crying for Sister Dunbar's suffering all day. Like, that's bad. Oh no. And I really, I didn't realize that Sister Johnson wasn't outside of herself focused on Sister Dunbar. Sister Johnson was having maybe she was in connection with Sister Dunbar, but she was also feeling her own pain from her own life experience. She was, at this point, she was turning inward and feeling her own feelings, and that was a good thing to do, gotta feel your feelings. So anyway, that was, I was doing my best, but it was kind of the opposite of what was helpful, so let's try not to do that. Let's all try to be compassionate with ourselves today as we compare ourselves with others, but let's also try to tell ourselves, hey, I'm a different person than this other person. We have different life experiences. We have different ways of thinking. We have different physical bodies that process things different ways, So, yes, we're different, but it's okay that we're different. And I'm doing my best, Okay. Saturday, February 7th, 2015, Mission Day 120. We finally met with Mike. It was a struggle to get there on time due to our slow lunch with Brother Hennon at Next Door Pizza, which we ended up not even being able to pay for, but it worked out and Lynn even came with us. He is such an awesome individual to teach, honestly seeking the truth, well enough read in the Bible to understand and recognize the pattern of apostasy, and he has had a powerful experience with prayer and feeling the Spirit. Before we invited him to pray, he was already going to take our message to God because he knows for himself that this is the source of all truth. Yay, I'm not worried about him at all. It was about 40 degrees for most of the day. For a while, we were walking around with our coats off. We even had Crystal Light with our leftover pizza for dinner because it just seemed summery. We had a super awkward lesson with a kid named Dean Maloney. We couldn't find a member to bring. His roommate was home. We showed him how to log on to family history, ... I honestly couldn't get over myself and stayed pretty quiet. But some good seeds were planted. He'd actually picked up a copy of the Book of Mormon before, so we left Mormon 10:3-5 with him and a restoration pamphlet. It may be in 20 or 200 years, but oh well. Our progress record for Ward Council tomorrow is super cool. We color-coded it for the different auxiliaries, and we had enough people that it was an entire sheet just for us. Smiley face. Whew, super tired. Can't wait to sleep. Smiley face. All right, lots of positivity apparently about this day. Who knows how much of that was... I probably wasn't feeling that great all day, but I'm certainly drawing lots of smiley faces. Interesting meeting with Mike. I think it's cool that Lynn got to come with us, just in the sense that she was allowed to be, like, the social privilege of being seen as, worthy of going along with the missionaries, just like any other member. So, it's anything around her feels really complicated now because of the situation, but I can say that I'm glad she didn't have at least that amount of ostracization, I wish that she was just in completely different circumstances, but that's just not the case, right? Interesting that, I was just so, I had my one perspective of that there is one truth, and I can really see that in the way I'm writing about him, and I'm like, oh man, I like teaching with Mike because he already knows, like, the fundamentals that he needs to know in order for him to learn, like, the rest of everything that's true that we could teach him. Like, he's read the Bible, and he's seen how prophets come and prophets go. And so, like, the first lesson is the restoration of the gospel. We taught that to him. He was like, yes, that makes sense. And I was like, yes, he has this foundation. And then the other big part of that first lesson is like, okay, you got to pray to God and he'll answer your prayer. And he's like, yeah, I already know that. And I was like, sweet. And I was just so confident in this worldview. I was so confident in this perspective. It's funny because in a way I'm just as confident in the way that I see the world now. Except the thing is, now I would say if someone could give me evidence that the way that I see the world now is not a good way to see the world, I would change my mind. And I do believe that. I'm wrong all the time. I learn different things all the time than what I thought, and my perspective, my worldview updates. So with having that freedom to being able to change my mind and being able to learn and grow, I, in a somewhat contradictory way, feel more assured in what I believe now than like really what I believed then, if that makes sense. Because then I wasn't allowed to doubt, and anytime anyone brought something up that would make me question what I thought, I had to just sort of shove it away. But there was always this dim awareness that there was the possibility that the things that I knew to be true, the way that I lived my life, was like based on falsity. It was all a lie. So my strong conviction was sort of covering up the fact that it wasn't safe for me to question things. And there was actually like fear there. And now that it is safe for me to question things, you know, it's not pleasant to be wrong, but it's not gonna crumble my life, you know. I'm gonna be okay. So yeah, I guess I like it better this way. And, you know, having got through the initial dark night of the soul where everything that I had thought was true was not true, and kind of figuring out what the heck, how do I even figure out what's true, you know? That was hard, but I'm grateful to have done that. Yeah. Also, I don't know why the lesson with a kid named Dean was so awkward. Maybe it was just he was closer to our age, so there was just that weird dynamic of talking to someone my age and trying to not feel really embarrassed that I was a missionary or something, you know. A little dark moment, though. I said, it may be in 20 or 200 years, but oh well. And if you didn't catch what I was referring to there, I will explain it for you clearly now. I said, all right, we planted the seed, and maybe in 20 years when he's 40, he'll, you know, faith will move in him and he will want to join the church. Or maybe when he dies, and 200 years later, he'll be in spirit prison and he'll be ready to hear the message. And it's all the same to me, you know, like, he might join this in 20 years, he might join this when he's dead, but it'll happen. It's like, so dark. That assurance of being so much more in the loop than he was about what was going to be best for him, you know? Wow. Anyway, last day. Sunday, February 8th, 2015, Mission Day 121. Well, Brother Congar came to church half an hour early, so we left ward council and did an impromptu church tour. My first one ever. He wore a super classy dark blue traditional African style silky suit. It was contemporary and cool, but still fit in very well. He ended up staying for all 3 hours, and apparently in priesthood, when he introduced himself, he said that he'll be bringing his family to Scranton, and he wants them all to be baptized. Waters of Mormon. He's just rocking the boat. We haven't even invited him to be baptized yet. I didn't think I'd ever deep condition my hair while in the field, but I decided to do it today. So that's something. Okay. Man, I forgot about this. You know, I typed these out before, and so sometimes I'm like thinking about what do I think about the crazy things that I wrote, and then somehow I forgot about this and it just hit me in the face again. Yikes. Well, cool that he was so respectful of time and that he came early and we got to give him a church tour. Two things I'm gonna focus on from this day. The first one was how I wrote, apparently in priesthood, he said he wants to bring his family and get them baptized. And the thing I want to focus on is he was our investigator and we were teaching him, right? But because we weren't men, we couldn't go with him to all the classes. So even though we were his only tie to the church at this point, we couldn't go with him to priesthood meeting, the third hour, because we had to go to Relief Society meeting. We had to go to women's meeting, and he had to go to the men's meeting, priesthood meeting. And I see in there some unfairness. It never really bothered me that we split up into groups for general church meetings when I was a member. I didn't really see the harm. But now I see harm in this. Not necessarily in separation. There's probably an argument for why it's good for men to have a men's meeting and women to have a women's meeting. I'm not going to fight about that, but I am going to say that in this context specifically, the men have the priesthood and their meeting is called priesthood meeting, and they all have the priesthood power, or, they're working towards it if they're investigators, right? And there's just that element of boys club, the element of we're the real people in power and the women will go and do whatever it is that women do. They'll talk about homemaking and talk about being wives and mothers and how hard it is when their children stray and ask for money for tablecloths and plan potlucks, but the men meet and they do the real stuff, talking about their priesthood duties and whatever it is that they talk about. So that irks me now, reading about this and how even in the context of conversion and us being someone's missionaries, that whole context itself feels kind of morally questionable now, but putting that aside, the fact that we couldn't go with him to all the church meetings is dumb. I don't like it. But also, the bigger elephant in the room is my comment of Waters of Mormon. I think when I wrote this, I didn't even realize the connotation of what I was writing. I just was like, oh my goodness, maybe I'd heard it said before by other missionaries, but I was like, oh my goodness, there's gonna be more than one person getting baptized. It might be like his whole family. And there's a story in the Book of Mormon about a whole community of people being baptized all at once, and it's like the story of the Waters of Mormon. I don't want to look it up to remember all the people, but yeah, but if I remember correctly, which I kind of hope I'm not remembering correctly, and I hope I'm just adding extra racism to the Book of Mormon than it has, but if I'm right, when Lamanites were baptized, their skin was made white again. So, now when I read this in the context of, there's a black man and his family, and he wants them to all be baptized, and my first thought is like, oh my gosh, it's like the Waters of Mormon. I was just, I was completely oblivious to the racial connotations of that. I hope I didn't say it to anyone. I don't remember if I did. Certainly Brother Kangar wouldn't have context to know what it meant, but that eats at me a little bit now, realizing how I didn't even realize that was a problem. I didn't realize what I was sort of suggesting by comparing the baptism of this man and his family to baptisms in the Book of Mormon. Ugh. Just another reason why I don't really like the Book of Mormon anymore. So I don't turn a blind eye to the subtext of the teachings in quite the same way as I did when I was a super faithful missionary, and a lot of it's just kind of gross. So anyway, that's it for the week. And that's my 19th week as a Mormon sister missionary. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast if you want to continue following my story. Ratings and reviews are appreciated, and please share with anyone you think would be interested. I hope you have a great week, and if you want my advice, just remember that you can love others best when you love yourself first. Bye!